On a planet called Origin in the eastern continent, there's a very prevalent religion that calls itself the Church of Origin. I know, talking big game. They worship a deity called the Allfather and hold that this deity created their worshippers in their image and gave them the right to hold power over everyone else. This religion is common in different forms around the Orient, but not ubiquitous. This is mostly because of a movement started almost 100 years ago by someone who's still alive today. Let's start with a bit of history. Before the year 2000, most of the Orient was politically unstable, and countries were mostly fragmented by different versions of this Church of Origin religion. Now, this has questionable evidence, but it's said that on the year 2000, the Allfather visited the people of Origin. This, or whatever really happened, obviously caused a lot of turmoil, as you can imagine everyone wanted to know whose religion was actually right. Before this, the most powerful country was one called Esperique. They believed that the Allfather had fused with the life and nature around them, and to worship them was to become a part of nature as well. They did this through a process called spirit fusion, which I swear I'll talk in depth about sometime soon. A lesser and at the time very fringe country/religion was the one of Anthropos, whose church was sometimes referred to by outsiders as the Church of Blood. In a text known simply as the Biblios, which is referred as holy by everyone under the Church of Origin, there's a verse that reads something like this. In the beginning, Origin created life in a pool of water. All power comes from the water. Unfortunately, the original language doesn't say water, only something like fluid, so a certain division translates that as blood. Their central study of magic is blood magic, which revolves around the consumption of blood as a power source. They find human blood to be the most valuable, which obviously makes most other civilizations think pretty low of them. This changed in 2000 when the Allfather supposedly gave holy artifacts to an Anthroposian royalty, validating them in the eyes of other Allfather believers. They gained an insane amount of power in the last 90 years, even though they split in half relatively early on due to a disagreement in doctrine. Lunix is the other half of what used to be Anthropos, which you may have heard about before and you will definitely hear more about later if you watch a lot of my videos. As Anthropos was gaining power, one man stood in the way of total control over the Oriental continent. In stories about the Allfather's visit, this man even stood in the way of God. Let's talk about Dridaland. Humanoids on Origin constitute one lineage, but this happened long enough ago that there are two taxonomic genuses of humanoid. One is of course Homo, which represents the vast majority including Homo sapiens, Noir, and Trifle. The second genus is Dridalis, which represents what we know as elves. There are three species of elves which weren't well understood until recently. Witches are an important part of their story, and all you need to know about them is that their dark magic affects someone's DNA. As the story goes, an elf who took a detour to avoid treading water was cursed by a witch to live in water for the rest of his life. His brother tried to fight the witch and was cursed to only know combat and aggression. The last brother was wise and avoided the witch. No one has ever observed a witch to give such thoughtful curses, so it's likely that that aspect of the tale is untrue. Also, it's unlikely for someone to survive an attack like this, much less live to reproduce and pass down the messed up genes. However, the amount of change in so little time between these three species can only be explained by a witch. But why did I tell you this, and what does it have to do with anything else? Sometimes there are mutations in elves that show a turning off, so to speak, of the witch genes, but this had only ever happened in the wild ones like bone eaters losing their tails, or tiger elves without shoulder brains. Rarely, an elf can grow significantly taller than usual, but this was considered a fluke. Let's talk more about the elves most people would probably think of when we just say elf. These people are weird in more ways than one. Not only are they short and stout like the other elves, their most significant oddity is their near-complete lack of sexual dimorphism. Down to the private parts, it's impossible to know whether an elf gives or gets pregnancies without a surgery or a DNA test, and even then it's not 100% certain. Because of this, their idea of gender is extremely loose. It has more to do with personal choice and identity rather than appearance. It was assumed that this was the product of regular evolution, because there's no way their people would be corrupted and mindless like those other witch-gened elves. One man, however, proved them wrong. Born to a poor farmer's family, Asterius was weird from the start. Not only was his cloaca divided in 2 parts, one of them was slit-like. His parents weren't educated, so they just hoped he'd survive at least a childhood so they could get some return on their investment. As he grew older, he was obviously different in more than just that. To put it simply, he developed more like a human than an elf. While he had always considered himself a man, he was rarely treated or referred to as such, even by fellow elves who didn't immediately realize he was one of them. Asterius was very interested in science, history, and politics, traveling around the Orient to learn about what's going on. During Anthropos' siege of the continent, Asterius came back to his hometown and organized a group of elves, teaching them Anthropos' plans and urging them to organize and fight back. As this movement spread, Asterius established the country Dridaland. He established the first organization for scientists in the Orient, where it was discovered that every elf was affected by a witch's curse sometime in their evolution, and that it likely happened many separate times. An easy explanation is that Dridaland and the area elves evolved is rife with witches. As this knowledge became popular alongside Asterius, he became known as the twice-cursed prince. Cursed once as all elves, and cursed again as the original curse's undoing was a curse in itself. I don't know if that makes sense when explained like that, but it makes sense to everyone who calls him that. According to legend, the Allfather accompanied the Anthroposian military in their continental siege. When the Allfather stood at the gates of Dridaland, they expected fear and submission like everywhere else. But the twice-cursed prince met them with a sword to the neck. You're seeing a sketch drawn by someone who saw it firsthand. The prince said, "Who are you?" The Allfather answered, "I am God." And as the legendary story goes, the prince answered, "You are no god of mine." As legend has it, a certain artifact that the Allfather gave to the Anthroposian royal guard would have went to the twice-cursed prince, but he expresses no regret about that. Nobody knows where it is or if it even exists anyway. Asterius have been an icon for atheists around Origin and is popular for heading the first country without an official religion. While Draconia has been a place people can practice whatever they want for longer, its official religion has always been Inviernism. Everyone knows about Inviernism, of course. A second thing that has made the twice-cursed prince popular is the fact that he's still alive. He's the only person who remembers the year 2000, and he's the oldest person we know of. He prefers to keep quietly to himself in the deepest part of the Temple of Mind, which is a library among other things his administration built for people to learn as much as possible. While he's only ever gained social power since he founded Dridaland, he actually let go of his political power only 9 years after its founding in favor of a democratic political system. The current president can often be found in the temple to seek counsel from the twice-cursed prince, like the 9 presidents before him. The prince has lasted a long time, but it seems like disease will take him out in the end. He's been sick for the past few years, and as his breathing is only getting worse, his chance of survival drops every month. Even with all the magic in the world, it's unlikely he'll make it past 115. And that's all I got for this video. Check out my Patreon, which you can subscribe to for just $1 a month to support me and get your name at the end of my videos. Thanks Captain Kobob, Art of Dying, and Mr. Kill. Next time I'll do this, I'll talk about a character who was artificially made sapient. Thanks for watching.